Okay, hello everyone. We're here for Wolfram Language Design Review, part of our Language Completeness and Consistency series. And we've got a few topics here. All right, split by and gather by.
Right, so we talked about these last time and about adding an operator form, and then we noticed, and I pointed out that they have a document. Why don't you just click on the links that will take you straight to the relevant note?
Okay, all right. I was nervous that it would go. Okay, brilliant. Well, that's pretty stupid. That's just stupid.
I don't think it's completely stupid, right? I mean, if you have a function that calls split by and you add an optional argument for a sorting function, then you don't need to special case the, when it's not provided, right? You can just.
Oh, but then why don't you use split in that case?
Because you're calling split by and you don't want to special case the, right? Instead of adding special case for the case where no function is provided.
You mean you're up in the higher in the pipeline, you have a function which is going to have a deficient argument that you then want to assume as identity. This is a horrible case. We made a mistake here.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a realistic thing that would happen. I understand special casing is an issue sometimes. It doesn't seem like it would be here. Meaning, I think we made a mistake too.
Okay. So
I think we should back out this mistake. I think the thing we should do first is, I agree we can't do this immediately, but let's at least, for a version, let's try and kill that note and generate a warning message on the one argument form.
Okay.
And then in a couple of versions, we can if we didn't hear if no pitchforks arrived, we can back out the mistake. I doubt anybody's used this, but we don't know for sure.
Okay. So
Let's just think about it for a second. What would be I mean, it would do something heinously wrong if they had used it.
If they had used it and we changed it?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's deprecate and generate a message. Drat. We shouldn't make those kinds of mistakes. Be interested to go back to the notes and figure out why we made that mistake. Just out of curiosity, somebody could just look at the source control system and just look what caused that to be. I mean, I just like to know because I think it's an obvious mistake.
Well, I mean, this is from version 7. We didn't even have operator forms then. So I don't know that it was an obvious mistake.
I see. Do we not have any operator forms in version 7?
No, those
I don't think so.
Version 10.
Yep.
Would have been 6 years later.
When did sort by get one?
Oh, much later.
Much later.
Okay.
Yeah, well, okay, so we didn't future-proof ourselves properly.
Because I mean that aspect of working on split by and gather by, I don't remember.
I guess there's
why we made that decision at all.
Well, we should go look at the source code just out of curiosity. See if there's any information. What's that?
Do people know off the top of their head what an empty list is? Right, so we do provide the possibility of. No. In the second argument, right? You can give a list of arguments of functions in the second argument.
I would hope it would do no splitting.
Yeah, that's what I would hope too.
Okay.
Okay. All right, onward to the next point.
Okay. So open the documentation for point.
I have. Okay, I mean, I also have some inline examples there.
What's the point?
Well, no, I'm starting off. You don't have to open the authoring page, just the documentation for point.
Okay. Nobody liked my pun about what's the point here. Never mind.
Point.
Okay.
And details and options. So this is, there's a bit of a camel's nose issue here. Notice that point takes two options, vertex colors and vertex normals.
Mhm.
And this made a lot of sense because vertex colors and vertex normals, even though points don't have vertices, but you can have multi-point objects, and being able to specify colors using basically the same syntax that you would for polygon made a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Which is what I'm illustrating with my example on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then it
So-
segues into this thing that does something completely different for polygons.
Well, it's not completely different, right? The point is that your color
Okay,
just
all right,
sort of
okay, fine.
it just sort of bleeds in.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the context of the Astro developments that we're doing now, we're being asked to support multi-points where you can specify sizes. This has no analog in line or polygon. And if one were to look at the options of points, one would say, well, maybe vertex sizes is the right thing. Although, now the camel's nose is all the way into, the camel is in the tent with the hump. It's reminding us that these were never vertices to begin with. And, maybe it still makes sense. I don't know, but then, and then in addition to the naming issue, there's also just a little bit of, discussion about how this should actually work. So I haven't written anything up. I thought, given
So, hold
we
on,
have
hold on. The issue is that the Astro project wants to use multi-points
Yes,
rather than individual points.
correct.
Right, because
And
then you're unpacking it, right? So you have 1,000 stars, and instead of
Okay.
one array, you have 1,000 points.
Okay, so this is an implementation issue at that level.
At that level, yes.
And I mean, don't we have all sorts of packing stuff that is, I mean, like for graph and for other things? I mean, I don't quite understand, because if you took it apart, okay, you're going to want to operate on that. Okay, is
So-
the point structure the end of the road, or are you going to want to take it and operate on it?
Well, I'm waiting
In the
for-
context of Astro,
this
or
week
Yeah.
up, but I think that, right, the point structure is sort of the end of the road, right? Just like the way we in geoposition, right? We pack in as many points into a single position as we can, because otherwise, right, the performance is just both time and memory is just not tenable.
Well, I mean, look, the fact that that's an issue, it's at some level, it's like column-oriented versus row-oriented storage of things. It's, with the data container framework, we will.
No, because right, it's the difference between having one array and having a gazillion arrays, each with a non-array head, which is
I understand that idea, but I thought the data container was going to be capable of having, just like it can have quantities, of having non-array heads in its effectively columns.
well, even supposing that were possible, which I'm not ready to concede, that doesn't change the fact that not all of these points are the same size. And right now in graphics, the only way you have to change that size is to have two separate points and have a point size or absolute point size in between them,
Right. Well, or a style wrapper.
or a style wrapper. So, right. So I don't see how the future array helps us in any way.
I mean, one could imagine, you know, an array where the things in the first column of the array are head point size, and the things in the second column of the array are head point, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's yeah. I mean, that's not really buying us anything, because that's a weird special structure again.
And not only that, but you know, the thing of head point size is going to be of dimension 1, and the thing of head point is going to be of dimension 1, 2, 1, 3, or 1, 2, depending on your.
Let's make a couple of comments here. So in graph, we have vertex style and vertex colors, and vertex size, right? Graph has that.
Yes.
Maybe we should use that for this.
Okay, I don't know anything about vertex size. Let me look that up.
If I say random graph,
Oh,
You
hey,
know,
Tony.
The syntax conflicts with what you want here.
why? Oh, I see, because it doesn't have a list of sizes.
Right.
Well, it does support a list. It means something else.
Yeah, it's X and Y.
Oh, wait a minute. Vertex size. Really? What?
No, it's a list of rules of like vertex blah goes to size blah. Or that's a possible, right? So you can give sort of a uniform size, but I think if you want to specify, it's a list of rules, which is.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's like one arrow, so whoops, 1 arrow 1, 4 arrow 1, otherwise they're defaults. Yeah, so it's a different setup. It's a sparse array, closer to a sparse array.
Yeah.
And my point was, you can also have a list on the right-hand side of the rule.
That means X and Y.
And there's also scaled and nearest. Yeah.
What's nearest?
You could do list the string nearest in the first element.
Which means what?
You specify a size relative to the distance to the nearest vertex.
Gosh, I should use that more. Anyway, okay. So this is a good reason to not have vertex sizes. It's just going to be super confusing.
Okay.
Right, and the sort of the other obvious name is point sizes, but given what point size mean, that's right. So what do we call this thing?
Okay, so my feeling is, okay, I'm going to make a claim. My claim is that if we're really going to do this, that it should be something that is more like point and then a list of the coordinates, and then
An optional second argument? Is that where you're headed?
yeah, that's kind of where I was heading, but let me just see something here. I mean, I don't like it very much, but I mean, I could imagine an optional second argument that's an association of, lists where each one gives the, the point size, the point color, whatever type thing. How does that mechanism relate to things that are used for meshes and so on?
I
Charles,
don't think
Charles, can you
don't think I can answer that.
Charles is supposed to be here. But was he, Avery, did we make him on call for some reason? Or is he just late?
Yeah, let me message Charles.
Because I think he's the only person who could really answer that question.
I mean, there are situations in which we sort of, okay, will the user ever see this, whatever it is that we produce for this?
Well, I mean, it would be preserved in the input form.
Sure. But I mean, if I look at a graph, for example, in input form, right? I mean, that graph, I guarantee, is quite, unsavory.
Nothing like what you typed in, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty unsavory.
Right.
I mean, I could imagine users who wanted to use this.
Use what?
I think George Herbert Walker Bush would want to use this
What?
for his 1,000 points of light.
Oh.
But no, I mean, well, certainly.
Actually, Sander makes a very interesting point on our live stream here. He says, why not a second argument like disk and circle for point? Which raises the interesting question, why are they points, not disks?
Actually, Astrographics is currently using disks.
So why do you want to use points? I mean, disks already have this idea. Oh, do disks have the idea? Can you have a multi-disk?
But then we have the problem with the colors. We have to insert colors in front of them one by one. So the idea is to handle quickly sizes and colors.
Well, but that's because you have this hack in points of using vertex colors for colors. I mean, if you had the same hack in disk, you could do colors the same way in disk.
Except that, well, disk isn't a multi-disk.
Right.
Could it be?
And there's ambiguous cases.
Yeah, that's the problem, is the ambiguities.
Why? I mean, you know what it is because you look at the first argument. And therefore you know what you're looking for in the second argument.
Do you?
Not
you-
necessarily.
In the case where you have two disks,
No, you
and the
don't.
second argument is is a pair, is that X, Y, or is that,
Right, but
radius
given that
1,
this is
radius 2?
primarily for what you are generating, not what a user is typing in, we can deal with putting more wrapping to disambiguate. Well, okay, so the issue is that what we really want to do I mean, at some level, what we need is a multi version of the general primitives. I mean, so right now we would say, style, blah, 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 comma, point size, whatever it is. Okay. Okay, I've got a crazy idea for you. What if there was a style function inside style? So you go here, you have the primitives. And what if you had something here Okay, the idea is roughly this. Whatever it is.
It wouldn't be RGB color.
What would it be?
It would be oh well, that's actually the weird thing, is that we've never said exactly what these options are. We never documented exactly what these options are. I mean, there's
Right, RGB color is ahead, right? So this would be.
Oh, I know, but point size is ahead as well. But what I'm saying here is, what
well,
is this thing?
no, because RGB color, there isn't an RGB color option.
I know
RGB
there isn't a
color
point size
sets
option either.
options. There is
not.
a point size option.
No, there isn't. Point size is a
As far as the front end is concerned, there is.
Okay, well, that's a different story. But there isn't.
But there is no RGB color option. There is an
Okay.
option for the colors of points, the colors of the
Okay, John,
front
you're
face
talking
of a
about a
polygon, the
different
back
thing.
face
You're
of a
talking about
polygon, that
different-
sort of thing.
You're talking about a different layer of the design than this.
I may be, but the point being is that it's not RGB color.
Okay, fine, whatever. Doesn't matter because it's going to get translated anyway for the front end.
Okay.
So what I'm suggesting here, and it's not quite the right setup, is a thing for multi-points, for multi-primitives, that basically is like a data container for styles. Okay, that has these packed lists that say this function. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, this is literally responding to the let's make a data structure. It's similar to this thing here. Let's make a data structure that we can represent, serialize, and it's not completely crazy, but it's probably not something you're going to want to type in.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're saying it's basically applying the left-hand side of a rule as a function head to mapping rather across the values on the right.
Right. I'm suggesting a thing that has the same level of relationship to graphics that this has to graph, which is you'd never type it in. Because I'm still not understanding. I mean, I don't think, for this is primarily an output story, isn't it, Jose?
For me, it is. Yes, indeed.
Well, and in terms of the user expectations, I agree with you that it's very unlikely that someone would expect to successfully read this, but I do expect the occasional user to want to create and use it, because they have the same kind of problem that we have, which is they want something at scale to work smoothly.
Yes. And one day I think we'll be able to do that just with our standard symbolic primitives. But I agree, this is a good intermediate. But so I mean, look, here's a possibility. It's not necessarily beautiful. So we have the notion of directive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, here's an idea. Okay, so right now, directive, I could say in my graphics, I believe I can just say something like directive red. And that's equivalent to just saying red, right?
Yeah.
Directive is effectively flat.
Right. But so now I have the question, what if I had, does directive flatten lists that are inside it?
Directive doesn't have any evaluation rules, I think.
Okay, but what do we expect this to do?
Blue.
Okay. So here's my question. What about the possibility of a multi-directive which can be given a list of things. Okay. And for jollies, it could actually allow a multi-argument form in which you could just say PointSize blah. Okay. And MultiDirective expects to map across a multi-primitive here.
And only a multi-primitive, right? So not the equivalent list of, point expanded out.
Sandra is asking reasonable question. Why doesn't PointSize just allow a list of values and just work?
Well, I'm not sure it would be possible, but maybe. I mean, just in terms of, getting the right level of lists.
Well, why?
Well, I mean, I think that's basically equivalent to what you just proposed of, but instead of having a multi-directive, we have multi-directives.
Every directive can be multiplied.
Yeah.
I think there's one place where that will definitely fail, which is a
Base form?
Hackalola. No, I was thinking of this Hackalola. The fact that works. Which we did because it was too painful to always have to be applying RGB color to things.
Well, but RGB color 0.4 doesn't mean anything.
It should be pointed out, by the way, that Directive does this, though.
Does what?
Works either with a list or without.
Yes.
That of course doesn't need to define what multi-directive would do, but I'm just raised that as an issue.
I mean, I guess the question is, well,
Avery is pointing out the directive of a list says it's equivalent to directive of the non-list varargs.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So coming back to Stephen's matrix idea, or data container idea, is there something there, John, with the template box support that Jason?
I'm sorry, with what again?
Jason's template box support that he just added.
To input box. Sorry.
Template.
Oh, template. I
mean, that comes back to Stephen's style function, sort of, but goes even farther.
Well, so you could maybe avoid the kernel overhead. So, and my understanding is that there's significant overhead example to make boxes, and you could probably use that to remove the make boxes overhead. It's unclear to me. I mean, my concern is that you might have purchased that at the cost of increased front end overhead. Template boxes are not as efficient as they should be yet. I mean, they're wonderful and we use them all over the place, but they have a bit of a scaling problem.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second.
Can I? Well, I just wanted to make sort of 2 points, which are one. I mean, RGB color of 0.4 doesn't mean anything, but certainly hue of 0.4 and gray level of 0.4 do. So I don't think we can do this in general. The other is, do point size or absolute point size take things like scaled or other things?
Yes, some of them do.
Okay. I mean, because one possibility is we only make point size a multi-directive thing.
Well, and by the way, this raises the question which we haven't raised yet, which is, what is the default thing? If you just gave a list of numbers, what is the default thing? Is it a point size or an absolute point size?
Yeah, I think that, look, I'm much more partial to something which is essentially a packaging mechanism, just like we have things like compressed graphics, right, which are not intended for user consumption. This, to me, what Jose needs is a thing which is for display. It is not, in a pinch, it's consumable, but it's not very consumable. How can I get a compressed graphics?
Really just list plot of or even any regular plot will do it. Just plot a sine wave.
But you'll only see it in the unformatted cell, right? You won't see it in the actual boxes.
I see.
Yeah, this was done by the front end, actually not by the kernel.
But don't we transmit things in this form over WSTP and things?
No. Over WSTP, we send the packed array.
Right, that compressed data just represents a single packed array, and in which case it's more efficient to just send the packed array.
All right, but
compressed data actually takes up more data than
all right,
the packed
but
array.
what I'm suggesting is that what we have is a thing let me just think about this for a second. Yeah, I mean, this would be a directive, a multi-directive that you could say style of point of blah, 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 a multi-point, comma, multi-directive, blah, blah, blah. And that would know that it's essentially threading itself. You could even call it threaded directive. It's a very obscure thing, threaded directive. Because that's what it is. It's like threaded, isn't it? Sort of.
Sort of.
And then in here, what we would do, I mean, I would suggest that we just say, literally, point size list. You want another directive, you say threaded directive. And maybe threaded directive isn't the right name. Hue, comma, list. They're all packable. They're all whatever. Comments from people.
So sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to ask about colors. So colors would take a matrix, right? It would be like a list of triples.
Yep.
Or quadruples if you want to add opacity.
Yep.
Yeah, but it will be a uniform, non-ragged array. I mean, if you want it to pack and so on.
Yeah, of course.
But you're the one generating it, so you have control over that.
And of course, you need to make sure you don't do something silly like an array of reals except for integer zeros and integer ones. Don't do that.
Right. And if you
Right.
do this on its own, right, not inside of a style, but right in front of the point, then if you had two multi-points that would apply individually to each multi-point, just like red on its own would.
Yeah, and so that was actually the point that I was going to bring up is by, I mean, technically, no matter how we do this, I could find a way to express it in style. But by having its principal expression in style, I'll just point out that multi-directive would apply individually to everything in the first argument, which might be a list of things.
Right, and each one would do that. I mean, I think, okay, so I've got another possibility.
And I'm not saying that's fatal. I'm just saying that's a consequence.
To me, that's sort of a good thing, right? Just because I could put, like I said, I could pop it out on its own, and then I'd have, you know, if I had two separately generated points, I wouldn't need to find the multi-points. I wouldn't have to combine them, assuming they were the same shape or, you know, wanted the same options. I
Yeah.
could just put them
which
next to
knows
each
whether
other.
that's it. Look, I think this is the right kind of direction. I think what we want to do is come up with a somewhat obscure thing, which if somebody sees it in the input form is not horrifying, but it's nevertheless a sort of packing type construct. Does that seem reasonable to people?
Yeah.
Yep.
If you know, it seems reasonable to me. I would put more stake in John's and Brett's opinions than my own on this particular detail. So, Brett.
I mean, I'm not opposed. I mean, I have implementation concerns, but
Well, why don't you guys think it through? And you know, from my point of view, this is going to be primarily, you know, like graph. It's going to be something where the input form is not profoundly embarrassing, but it's not something a user will typically ever see.
Well, so Brett and I can hash this out and come back with a refined proposal in a future instance.
Let me by the way, say why users aren't going to see it, and just make sure that we're on the same wavelength. I mean, so in the case of graph, the reason users don't see that input form is because mostly they deal with a graph by just gulping the whole graph, or they have accesses like edge list and so on, right? So in the case of astrographics, I'm assuming that most of the time users will deal with it. Oh, I've got a list of stars, things like that.
Well, the stars are part of the background. It's just that you want to say, I want to see all the stars beyond magnitude 5 or something. And so it may be 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. We are supposed to be able to see several thousand stars. So it would be nice to be.
And the whole point is we just want to have some way of representing a packed version of that graphics primitive.
Right, but because then we want to rotate the sky in a manipulate, and we want it to be fast.
What I hear Jose saying, and please correct me if this sounds wrong, but that is that the astro visualization stuff is like a lot of other visualization functions that you know, it does a bunch of work and boils it down into fairly basic graphical result where, you know, the original meanings are no longer, you can't go back and dissect the image and say, you know, like in a plot, you can't go back and dissect the image and say, oh, this first line is actually, you know, a plotted sine wave or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. So the stars are generated by astrographics. Users will not say, give me these 2,000 stars.
Right, but I presume like geographics, the original input is still in there, right?
Yes, but the point is that the original input doesn't have the list of the 2,000 stars.
Right. Yes.
It may have something saying, give me the stars above magnitude 4.
I mean, basically what you're saying is you want to have a sorry, just 1 second. You want to have something which is like a background, but you want it to be in arbitrary graphics.
Exactly. Yes. So astrographics is vectorial fundamentally, except for the galactic image that we put sometimes. I mean, this could be used also if for some reason we wanted to represent cities in the world in geographics with different colors and different sizes because they have different populations, could be used there too. But it's not that common.
Okay.
Yeah.
But basically all of these things are background-like images that you happen to want as resolution independent graphics.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe we should address that issue of how to get essentially a quotes background image that is, you know, of a large number of elements. Anyway, I don't think it matters much what this is. I think you can put it in some head that basically says, you know, background image or something, or background graphic, or whatever you want to call it, and then just pack it in with some, you know, or packed graphics or something. I mean, even I would even consider something like,
Well, we already have graphics complex, which is maybe not exactly what you're
Oh, that's
describing,
the
but
thing I was trying to remember earlier.
yeah, it's the same sort of thing.
exactly. So could we not reuse graphics complex for this?
I mean, that sort of comes back to the original proposal.
Yeah, so I mean, graphics complex is really about abstracting away location data, not style data. So that data element in the second in the second argument, that's locations. And you can't make it be anything else. Now you can use those locations as polygons, lines, points, whatever, but they're locations.
Sorry, 1 second. Say it again, sorry.
Okay, so the second argument of graphics complex, those are X, Y, or XYZ coordinates. They really, you know, they can't be
First argument.
things.
First argument.
Oh, yes, sorry, excuse me, first argument, yes. You know, it really can't be things that like get past the style directives or anything
No, I
like
understand.
that.
So graphics complex itself is not going to cut it.
Yeah.
We could add a third argument called, which would be style data, maybe. Maybe that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, graphics complex already takes, you know, vertex colors, vertex, you know, whatever's.
Yeah,
as
I mean,
options.
we actually, it's a bit of a challenge for us to keep on top of ensuring that graphics complex with an arbitrary second argument can, you know, work with the options that are specified.
By the way, Sandra is commenting that multi-point disk and circle will be welcome anyway, and I agree with that. I've really wanted that a bunch of times. Fix the radius.
Multi-point what?
Disk and circle.
Disk and circle, okay.
So you want disk and circle to thread over the first argument.
That is correct. That seems like a very useful thing. I've sort of assumed that works many times and been disappointed that it doesn't.
Right, although again, there's the bread case of is that two circles, one of radius 5 and one of radius 6, or is it 2 ellipses?
No. We're not talking about the second argument. We're just saying the first argument. We're saying identical circles. If you want different circles, you're out of luck. But you just want many copies of the same circle.
Right. I think he was asking if you have a list in the second argument. So I think in that case,
In that case, you're getting a replication of that list for every circle.
Yep.
So every one is an ellipse.
Okay, so you're not allowed matrix cube things in the second argument, only in the first.
That's correct. That's correct. The first argument will be the only one that would multi. And I do think that's highly worthwhile. And I should have made that explicit point myself because I've run into that issue many times. I don't know about our other graphics primitives, but it seems like a good thing to be able to do. All right, so we got two things. We got that.
Well, I mean, we've been steadily pushing through all the graphics primitives where there were no ambiguities. Fine. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'm saying circle is like there's no threaded, there's no multi, there's just multi-positional.
Yeah, we can do that. That's straightforward.
Okay, then we should. Okay, so you guys need to make some proposal for this. I would recommend just a very packed object that is optimized for display and optimized for use and not, don't worry too much about what it looks like. I mean, what it looks like in
What the input form is.
yeah, right, exactly. Okay.
This one should be much more straightforward.
Okay, good.
It'll only take half an hour.
Okay, prototype build.
Yeah.
And there is a
nice
documentation page, a futurized page that you can open.
What's happening here? Why is this not opening?
I don't. Oh,
It's just dog slow.
it was
Unbelievably
auto opening the
slow.
DocuTools palette, which was
Yeah, and this is now
contributing.
unbelievably slow.
Maybe that the kernel is crashing if it's.
Okay. All right. So create lightbox.
Okay, yeah, I don't know that I have up-to-date rough page. Maybe one of us can share if we have, if you want to see the actual examples in action.
I'm just excited to know what on earth this is. Why is this?
So the model is CreateDialog.
Okay. Okay. And how does this end? Only with a user action.
Yeah.
How does CreateDialog? Okay. So, but there's no choice that you have. Like CreateDialog, you might expect that the dialog would return something to do with what you picked in the dialog.
It actually doesn't. The CreateDialog totally does not do that.
Right, but something like input.
There are dialog functions that do that, like choice dialog does that, but CreateDialog absolutely does not do that, and that's very intentional.
But so create lightbox would again be a no information transmission. It's just a blocker.
Well,
it doesn't actually block the kernel, and if
not by default. It could be there's a proposed option to block the kernel, but it doesn't block it by default.
So what happens? So it brings up the lightbox, and then things are singing and dancing behind it.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
the kernel. Well, if the evaluation queue is non-empty, the kernel will continue evaluating, and if it is empty, then it'll just wait until you dismiss and type something else in.
So, I mean, keep in mind this
Okay,
is.
so what just happened there was it created 10 lightboxes.
Yeah, and did you notice that it got lighter?
I did.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, but if I do this, if I say, how do I do this? I have an animation going on behind it. The cheapest way to get an animation is.
The answer is yes, that would work.
Yeah, like do like animate sign of I don't know, X plus A.
Okay, so then what I'm doing is I'm saying, I don't understand how I get that as output. Oh, I see. I have that on a separate thing here. I say animate plot sin X plus A.
Right. from 0 to 2 pi and or 10 and a from 0 to 2 pi.
Okay, now I create the light box. And mostly it'll just emerge from the darkness, from the shadows. Okay, only one level of light box. That's cool. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't move this thing. It's kind of annoying.
So the implementation of this is as an attached cell that is covering the entire notebook window. And
What's that
the-
puppy? That's an escape.
yeah, that would be a buglet. We can deal with
Okay,
that.
I'm fine. That's an escaped pet cockroach, as opposed to never mind. Okay, well that's cool. All right, what do we have to figure out here?
So there's a string
there's locking.
option.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. Where does the label go?
In that top area that was empty. So
I see. You probably should have an option for the, oh, there is an option for the color.
I'm wondering if you want it to be a bit lighter or a bit more transparent than it is, just in
I
case
think
you have
so.
more than one, but maybe that's wrong.
I mean,
Well, and that background option applies not to the surrounding gray
Oh, that's
translucent
to the pop-up.
hump
currently, yes.
may not be correct. Yeah, because you've got two different things that it could apply to. I mean, normally background,
Yeah, normally it applies to the content, right? So in that sense, I think Lou's decision was correct.
yeah.
But we could use appearance for that somehow.
For what, the appearance of the light box?
Correct. Of the white bit.
Yeah.
No, wait a
Be
minute.
that-
Of the big expanse of gray, or of the small thing in the middle?
I was suggesting the small thing in the middle, and then we could repurpose background to be the big expanse of gray.
Sandra is commenting, not sure about the name Lightbox. Yeah, I agree that it's more like a blocker. I mean, I know that's a name in user interfaceology.
Yes, that's why we used it.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not capitalized, but I was a bit concerned about the name because it might sound like a box object, which it's not.
What else might it be called? Does it called a blocker or something, or a I mean, it is a blocker.
I mean,
don't think that's right.
you obsess about these sorts of things, but we didn't obsess about CreateDialog and whether it would be confused with dialogue sessions.
We did think about it.
Yeah, we might have thought about it, but we never said let's reinvent the world's terminology because we have.
I know,
this
but
thing in
dialogue
the
is
product.
a lot more common.
Right, like I'd never heard the term lightbox before this function, before Lou told me about this function, whereas I did.
Yeah, and
know
by the
what
way,
a
a
dialogue
light box normally is a kind of thing you put slides onto to look at them and things. You put transparencies onto.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes,
used here.
yes, I know. I've actually used a light box before.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure so have I. But I mean, but this
you
is
are
the
showing your
exact
ages,
opposite.
I'm sorry to say.
What's that?
What are
Okay.
these slides you talk about?
Okay, so listen, guys, but the fact is that the use of the term lightbox in that case is the exact opposite of this case,
Correct.
which is really bad.
Well, I guess.
I wouldn't fully agree with that statement. It is opposite in the sense of where the light is, but it's not opposite in the sense of where your eye is supposed to be. Your eye is supposed to be on the things sitting on top of, you know, the background. That's
God.
in that sense, both light boxes
Right, but
are
the-
the same.
This
Also,
thing is primarily to be used as a blocker. Yes, go ahead. What were you going to say?
yeah, I was going to say that in web design, Lightbox is what this is. So I guess for people that are used to web design, this name would make perfect sense.
What else does a web light box normally do?
So, I mean, the main thing is it's a form of in-page modality, which is to say it's, and I don't think this is always true, but it's often true, that
Yeah.
it's basically telling you don't get to do anything else until you address this interface.
Yeah, I understand. But sometimes that interface contains a lot of content on it. It's not like the case here where it's a pure blocker light box.
Well, I mean, this of course can contain arbitrary content.
Well, can it on the gray area?
Not on the gray area, but
Right. So,
but
but isn't that something-
the, you know, the thing that your eye is supposed to be focused on can be of arbitrary size and content.
What about a name like notebook pop-up?
It's not just a pop-up.
Yeah, I mean,
I really think if you look at web examples of Lightboxes, it confirms perfectly with what this function seems to do.
Which I don't know if this is the origin of this terminology, but the Wikipedia, when it, other than the thing for slides, it says refers to Lightbox as a JavaScript library for displaying things and dimming out the rest of the web page. I don't know if that's the origin.
Yeah, which somebody used this to mean that, and it might have been a non-native English speaker who thought this looked vaguely similar, and you know, God knows if it. I don't know.
Have we used the word foreground for anything?
Or color, right? Don't we?
I'm not wild about the name Lightbox. Maybe we can say, I mean, if we thought we could get away with a longer name, create blocker Lightbox would get the right meaning potentially.
I'm again objecting to the name blocker, but
Why?
because I mean, I know it carries the wrong connotations to me, especially given that the default for the blocking option is false.
Okay.
well, so I mean,
it's not like
as with dialogues, there are two notions of modality that we're tracking. One is modality with respect to kernel evaluation. The other is modality with respect to Windows. In this case, with respect to just the one window. In the case of dialog box, it's with respect to every window in the application.
Exactly, right. This is what I'm saying. It's only blocking one notebook as opposed to a true blocker, which would block all notebooks or all kernel evaluations or both.
This is a curtain on your notebook.
Notebook.
Sandra is commenting, shouldn't it be a wrapper for dialogue, input, choice dialogue, etc.? For what to do with the rest of the notebook when this thing comes up? It's a good point.
I was gonna say, I mean, so something that seems similar to me, John, which, you know, Apple has moved away from, or when they had sheets. You know, that I think were
Yeah.
also a per window thing.
Yes, yeah. Well,
And
they're
so I'm wondering if
they
this
are
is-
conceptually similar because because they enforce modality on a single window. Yes.
Right. So I'm wondering if this is like window dialogue, with potentially different appearances as styles change.
So can somebody address Sanders' point about why isn't this an option to all of these things that pop up a modal object on the window?
So, okay, so if we give choice dialog, for example, an option,
Light boxing arrow true.
that might work for choice dialog. I
What
don't
about
think
input?
for the various kernel modal ones, I think it would work, but I don't think it would. There's for something like CreateDialog, there's an ambiguity
Why?
there, because CreateDialog actually CreateDialog actually returns, right, Lou? Yeah, actually returns the notebook object that it created, and that gets used, I mean, by people who understand CreateDialog. And the notebook object, in that case, the only notebook object it could possibly return is the notebook that it was created inside of.
Right, it would be an option that changes the structure of the output.
I don't understand. I don't understand. This thing, why are we making it? Isn't it the case that you basically, this light boxing mechanism is just a way of blanking the rest of the screen to highlight some particular, dialogue,
Yeah.
pop up, whatever.
Because something else might like to know when it goes away, right? So it needs to return the.
Yeah, I mean, so if you, just evaluate the thing that I threw in chat, notice that A, it returns immediately, and B, it actually returns something useful. Okay, now take a look before you close it, look at the output.
There's a notebook object, yeah, which represents that dialogue.
Yes. And that's not just because we were being completist. That's because sometimes it matters.
Sure, but what is create lightbox returning?
The cell object to the attached cell. And so, right, you have the reference to.
Okay, so then I'm going to say I'm going to say cell
Well,
print of that.
Well, that's been destroyed by now, so it's going.
So what the hell is it? So I don't understand. What do you mean it's been destroyed? Well, what do I do
Well,
with
you
it?
closed it. That cell has
Yeah, I
been
understand.
destroyed.
Okay. But so what? Well, I don't like what it says when I've closed it there. But anyway, be that as it may, what would I do with the thing if it is returned by create lightbox?
You could, for instance, wait 3 seconds and then notebook delete it. You can have an auto dismissing lightbox.
Right.
For
Or you could have a behavior which waits to see if it's been destroyed and takes an action once it's been destroyed.
How do you do that?
Stephen, I think you're laboring under the notion that this is, a thing which is for which the only use case is sort of shift enter, do something, and you're done. I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to make it a fully enabled citizen in the in the user interface library, components that we have, so that code which may not be running as a result of Shift Enter, and
Yeah, I
code
get
that may not be running in a single evaluation, but in multiple evaluations from multiple sources.
How do I throw up a light box that hasn't already been destroyed?
You can do it in another notebook.
Okay. So you're saying it's light box at a distance type thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Let's-
So
Create lightbox. You can point create lightbox at a notebook object.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see it.
Okay.
Right, I mean, if you want to try it out, right, do evaluation cell, evaluation notebook bracket in one of your notebooks, copy out that notebook objects and then.
Yeah, I get it. I realize how to do it. I can see how that would work. In terms of name, I'm kind of wondering if light boxing might be a better term than light box. Oh, the author of Lightbox.js uses the term overlay.
Right, I was just thinking about notebook overlay.
Well, that was what I wrote over here. Create window overlay.
Okay.
Overlay.
Create notebook overlay.
Yeah.
I would not have quite the level of complaint to that name as I do to blocker whatever.
Wow. So create notebook overlay sounds like a reasonable thing. And then as the content of the overlay, and to me,
And by the way, to be clear, I'm not opposed to the idea of having options to something like choice dialog either. It just doesn't quite work for the asynchronous case.
so what would that option be called? Lightboxing arrow true or false? Overlay.
Well, if we call it overlay here, we need to call it overlay there too, right?
So what would we call it?
Well, I think it would be notebook overlay true false, right? Because overlay on its own means something.
Well, or notebook overlaying.
Yeah, maybe.
We have modal, which means modal with respect to all windows. Maybe we need a notebook modal
What is modal an option to?
to things like create dialog.
It's just the word modal.
Modal arrow true or false. Yeah.
Well, why don't we have modal arrow automatic, which means the current window?
There's
Which is
something that is slightly worrying me about that, but I'm not able to articulate it.
But that would then deal with the blocking option for create window overlay, create notebook overlay. Right? That is the blocking option, is a modal option.
Blocking with respect to being able to interact with the notebook, not with respect to kernel evaluation.
Isn't that what modal means too?
No, modal is all about window availability, about user interaction in Windows.
And what's this?
What are you pointing at?
The lightbox thing, isn't this about modal interaction Windows?
Yes, but not kernel blocking. So you use the word blocking. I maybe there's some confusion about which term.
Is modal a possible name?
Okay.
To be used instead of the thing going blocking. No.
Okay, so choice dialog, for example, is inherently kernel blocking. That's just the design of the function. It is not inherently window blocking, but can be made to do so via option. And I guess the proposal on the table then is that it could let's see, actually, does CreateDialog take modal as an option?
It must.
Surely it does. Yeah, although it seems not to be strongly documented, but yeah, so
Strongly documented. I don't see it documented at all. And it
yeah,
has an absolutely anemic list of options.
right. Well, there may be a statement somewhere in here about CreateDialog taking the same options as something else. That's I'm allowing for that possibility, but I didn't read all the way through. But yeah, because in fact, if you look at the options list, I mean, CreateDialog basically takes the same options as notebooks.
Okay, well, so this is badly documented, so that's a separate issue. But
right, yeah. So yeah, I mean, we could do modal arrow automatic in that context, and while there are some considerable implementation problems around that, there's the design problem is less so. It's not my favorite way of doing things, but
sorry, but I'm sorry, what would you just say? What?
So yeah, I'm working down the option of modal arrow automatic, assuming that's still on the table. And what I'm saying is there are considerable implementation problems around that, but we might be able to make it work from a design perspective, though.
Let's explore. So we've got create notebook overlay. We've got notebook overlaying arrow true or false for these other things. And we've got the modal option for create window, create notebook overlay.
Actually, okay. Here's what bothers me. The CreateDialog doesn't have a way for, I knew there was something that was bugging me. CreateDialog does not have a way for you to specify a notebook object. So which notebook object gets blocked? I mean, you could say evaluation notebook. That would usually be correct, but we would be basically hard coding that value in.
Because CreateDialog is a free floating dialog.
Yeah. Which by default is blocking the kernel, but not the front end, but yeah.
There's something about this that isn't quite right. I mean, I'm a little spaced out here to figure this out. I don't think this is quite right. I don't know what the relationship is between the dialog boxes and this. It feels like the kind of thing where this is just dressing for the dialog boxes.
Well, so I'm, while you guys have been talking, I've been letting my mind wander a little bit. And I'm wondering, is this something that has to work at the entire window level? Or, does it make sense to have something like this for like cells that is able to obscure a cell for some period of time? And I mean, I'm reminded
or even a box.
of
Yeah.
Hmm?
Or even a box. John and I have had this conversation before. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like, okay, so I put a link in chat to the puzzling stack exchange. And so if you go down to the answers, they have these, they have this interface to, so that people can answer without spoiling the puzzle.
Right.
And then, to some extent, this feels like a very similar type of thing.
I think this thing needs more thought. And I think it's being Okay, let's take a look at the other items on this agenda. This requires more thought. I've never seen this before. I think it requires more thought, and I think a box level version of this would be nice. And to me, it's something which is kind of like a user interface element, just like you might say, I don't know, panel or something, right? Panel, you can put a panel around anything. So similarly, you could put a blocker around anything. I mean, just like, you know, to me, this is more like a tab view or something where you say, you know, put a tab view around A and B. Okay, fine. And I click it and it does this. And I would say, put a blocker in front of, put an overlay, you know, an overlay blocker in front of this thing. And then I can press the button.
And to be clear, this, I mean, the implementation is just window dressing on attached cell. It's a lot of window dressing,
Yes,
but it's just window dressing.
But what I'm saying is the interface that I think will be nice is something where to a box, like in tab view, you can just put it in front of a box and it'll give you a thing that has this, oh, clear this overlay. Great, I cleared it. Or alternatively, you put it in front of a cell or in front of a whole, you know, notebook.
So, so if I'm understanding correctly, you basically want a target, some sort of. Well, can't you do that with the OBJ option with argument?
No, only in an incredibly kludgy way with DOMs and so on.
With
But
what?
this is just with a DOM, with some kind of DOM handle. You could do that.
I don't know what you mean by DOM handle.
I mean to a cell object or something like this.
Um,
You can't do it in this way. This is a very straightforward way. If I could say, you know, I mean, we've got this concept of an overlay. What does that do? I thought that would work.
In a list.
Yeah, I mean, this is something very similar, except it doesn't have that clearing mechanism. Right, and that's what I would have hoped would work.
Well, I would say that there's a difference between this and that, in that this has, right, the tab view only has an interior and this has an exterior. So, you know, how big do you want, you know, too far it wants to go?
Overlay is an elementary thing. It's not high level. You build things from overlay. You know, using overlay directly, you know, to produce an interesting result is not common. What you do is you build higher level stuff with it. Attached cell is an elementary thing. Create Lightbox is designed as a higher level thing.
But why couldn't I do this by saying, you know, create a lightbox here, and instead of having this overlay where it's just an overlay and it sits there, I have a little button here where I can clear the overlay.
I mean, that's
Right.
toggler.
Right. But again, why is that restricted to the graphics and not to right? If you just had a one argument thing where it's your you know, your object, you know, your blocker of, you know, disk, why is it just the rest of the graphics box and not the whole output cell?
I'm sorry, toggler, what are you saying? What?
Right, so you were saying, you know, why can't I have a blocker or whatever we call this function of graphics of disk?
Yes.
So why does the overlay only cover that type?
I don't know.
Where and not the whole
I understand. That's a different case of, look, I think there's more thought required here. I think it should be able to cover multiple levels of thing, and it should be able to be something where, you know, I can write something like this and just have an Xing out button, or I can write a version of this where it covers the whole window. I don't know exactly what those pieces should be.
Right, but well, I guess I would say, I mean, this sounds like a different function to me, right? Because you're not popping up any content, right? There's only the
Well, you
height.
might pop up content. I don't know. I think this requires more thought. Let's not solve this now. I think we've defined a direction. Let's more thought.
I'm not happy with that direction. But
what do you
I'm
wanna
not.
do?
But I'm not eager to open up. You know, a
Why do we
major
want this
discussion
right
about it
now?
because we're running against some time limits for me here.
You mean today?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just look at this. What is this?
So this is basically dealing with how do we show rasters
Mm-hmm.
in the front end. This is a front end option effect. You know, how do we display and if you there are some samples examples below.
What is this for? Is this related to
So
fuzzing out of rasters that we've seen in various kinds of printing and PDF export and so on?
No.
Not printing PDF. This is on screen, really.
Okay, so this is the analog of an interpolation order for a curve. Is that true?
Kind of.
I would say it's more like anti-aliasing for your raster.
Yeah, I mean,
it's basically choosing an algorithm to generate pixels to fill in the gaps. So that's the simplest way to put it.
What gaps?
So like, for instance, that request the fastest, so the middle example, right? Mm-hmm. That is what, like a couple of pixels tall and 3 pixels wide, but it's being drawn to a region that is hundreds of pixels wide and maybe 80 pixels tall. So the data for the raster doesn't fit the destination rectangle. So it has to generate new pixels in order to be able to fill the rest in. And basically, you're just choosing which algorithm is used. There's none, so it gets duplicated. You might use like a bicubic or something like that.
This is exactly like interpolation order. I mean, this is like the analog.
I mean, really, it's resampling.
Yeah, it's
I even put it in the C also. It's resampling.
Yeah. So like, for instance, depending on who it is and who designed it at the time, you know, some of the people at Microsoft like to call this interpolation mode.
Okay. But I mean, isn't it exactly the 2D analog of this?
Yes. Right, only on a different axis, right? Because it's the the value is translated as a color, not as a height. But yes.
Yes. And which orders can we do?
Well, that's platform dependent. Like
it's the operating system that does it.
Yeah, we are not regenning it on a per pixel basis. So like some of them might, like on Mac, you don't get the 4 on the bottom example there. I think the last 2 on the right are practically identical. In visual,
to me, it seems better to call it raster interpolation, because otherwise, when you say smoothing quality, I'm going to say, I want the best. I want high smoothing quality. But that's not really the right thing for many cases. I don't really want high smoothing quality, because I actually, for many uses of rasters, that's like garbage.
Well, I'm not attached to the name smoothing quality at all.
That's why this is here for the name.
What about raster interpolation?
I think your connection to interpolation is going to be fairly unique among anyone who cares about this.
Weren't you just telling me that the operating system calls it something about raster?
Microsoft calls it interpolation mode.
Actually, I didn't realize Microsoft used that name. I don't think that's
Yep,
common.
I looked it up earlier.
What's
just to
used on the
double
Mac?
check my memory.
What's used on the Mac?
On the Mac, I didn't get a chance to do yet.
Okay, well, let's look at that. But the Microsoft use of interpolation
Yeah,
does make it, does
Canvas.
support.
Canvas. The current name comes from Canvas from the HTML spec. But like I said,
I don't like it because I think
that's fine.
smoothing quality, it's like, I want to be smooth, high. Okay, but now it's giving me all kinds of ripples and all kinds of weird stuff like this.
Well, I would suggest that maybe we want order in here, so raster interpolation order, or maybe even.
Except that then it
order.
suggests that you're actually giving a number,
Okay.
which we're not.
So yeah, I mean, let me stress again, this is very much like resampling, except resampling specifies algorithms that are guaranteed to be run. And here we can't guarantee what algorithms the operating system is going to use.
I understand, but we don't have resampling will be an image processing operation on this raster.
Yeah, well, and that's image processing is effectively what the OS is doing for us on our behalf. Yeah.
I think raster interpolation is the right name. And I think it should be none as a symbol, and then it should have, I don't know, none or true, false. False or none should be one thing. True should be whichever one of these you pick, and then we can have these more fine gradations in the case of an operating system that supports them. But I would suggest that any of those string names should be, if all else fails, make it be the one that corresponds to true, given that the operating system might not distinguish them. And you don't want to be, if you sent somebody a thing that was in high raster interpolation and it I'm sorry, we don't have that here. It's got to not do something silly.
Right, which I believe is what it currently does. I mean, I think on Linux, basically the three pictures to the right all look the same, at least to me. So
okay.
I'm up against the wall here. I really
see you later, John.
And I will point out that I will point out that we're well past 5 o'clock. So
all right, okay. Well, let's just see what this is, since we have people who were waiting for this. Let's just see what this is.
Okay.
Tree layout. Oh God. So is Charles here?
Charles is here. Yes,
I am here.
Okay. So the issue is this orientation doesn't have mirror reflection. The one that you're doing here and this one here with tree layout.
Right, they're the same.
Right.
Right now they're completely consistent with each other.
So tree layout is right. Tree layout is pretty much just calling, the tree layout. I mean, the layout
I
embedding.
understand. So I mean, the issue is, do we want top flipped? Whatever that means. Top, left, right. Because that's what it is.
Maybe for trees, but not for graph. Right. So that's the.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's obviously for graph.
I mean, what's the meaning on graph? So for graph, when you say orientation, so you just specified where we start for the root, right? And we solve it that way, right? We don't.
I know. But you're going to have something. I see. You're saying it's pretty arbitrary which order the vertices come out in. Whereas with a tree, there's a definite ordering of vertices.
Exactly. Also, we don't want to enforce that.
Right.
So one question that I don't know the answer to is there a what? I mean, I know I can manually calculate all the coordinates myself, but is there an easy way to flip the orientation if we wanted to? So
for a graph?
For graph.
No.
Well, the same like, I mean, the tree code back there can just do a graph embedding, you get the coordinate, and then you apply
Yeah,
the,
that's what
the
I was
transformation.
saying. Right, that's what I was saying.
I asked if there's an easy way, not doing
Right,
everything
that doesn't
myself.
involve explicitly. I don't think it's particularly necessary, but I think for trees,
Well,
We-
I
we-
mean,
we have a
well, if
route-
you
we-
convert between graphs and trees, you might want them to look the same. So I
We-
do think there would be an advantage to.
I mean,
Okay,
for some graph layout, we have a a rotation option, right? We can add a reflection option to an axis if you want, but so you can then
when do we have a
specify.
rotation option for what?
I think for the graph layout, you can put like orientation there. You can say rotation 90-degree.
In addition
That's
to orientation.
Yes,
Okay.
I think we have it for all the layout in principle. I think.
Well, okay,
What
that's
does-
fine. So fine, but that's
what does
easy.
that
'cause you've got-
mean? So it does an orientation. So the orientation is one rotation, and then it applies a second rotation on top of that, or is that? Or
No,
is
no,
that
no,
like
no. For graph layout, you can say you can run the layout and then you can decide to rotate it, right? So you apply a rotation.
So that's
If I
just like
remember
doing
correctly.
rotate on the graphics.
You
That-
mean just like this?
Right, if I remember correctly, we have a rotation option. Exactly.
But what kind of rotation option? Where's the rotation option?
Oh, well, I have to look at the documentation, but you can do graph
what?
layout, layer embedding goes to, rotation goes to 90-degree. Instead of orientation, you can change that to 90-degree, I believe.
Well, I mean, so I should be able to do instead of orientation or as well as orientation?
I think if you, as well as orientation, we apply the rotation after that, I think.
Yep, you're right.
So if three need that, we can just also add a reflection option, and then you can specify it at the time. So
Okay, well, so it'd be nice to add a reflection option, but the question is how it's specified in tree. And I mean,
Steven,
oh,
your suggestion for tree was that left and bottom would just automatically have a reflection, so that the first
Exactly.
element is on the top or the left.
right, so it's done automatically when they call it, right? But
no, but
mean,
I understand it.
Yeah, right. I mean, we could imagine like a list which is either bottom reversed, or we do, bottom right, bottom left, which means like where we.
You might want to use that.
The first child.
Like put
Right,
the
but
root on
so-
left a line or right a line.
Hold on. You're saying
well,
we would say top right, for example, would mean the top
That
is what you put down as the root, and the first branch goes to the right.
Yep.
okay, so let me add something which I'm not for sure. It may probably happen, from the top of my head. So there you just have four nodes, right? Three child, right? If you have 1,000 of them, I cannot guarantee you that it was the reverse order or a descent order. They can be flipped. They can be any arbitrary order, right? So a reflection by itself is not even enough.
You're saying every level needs to say which order it goes in.
Exactly. And even inside the level, you cannot guarantee that the order is the reverse order from the vertex list for graph and such.
No, but you're saying if I look at this and look at that 5 goes to 10 and 17, that's an arbitrary choice. I don't even know why it did it the way around it did it with the 15, 1, 9. I don't know why that 1 didn't go to the left. Why didn't that 1 go to the left?
Because it wasn't generated as the first child, right?
Random tree.
It's random tree.
Okay, fine. But you're saying that in principle, every one of those branchings could have a different orientation. Right, Charles?
Right, order, per se.
Yes, but well, it could have a different order. Probably one doesn't want it to have a different orientation, like the tree going, yeah, probably one doesn't. Probably the orientation is top down. All right, so the issue is that at every
is that an
node,
issue, right? I think if you just do the reflection, right, basically,
With
I make a
respect,
suggestion. I make a suggestion. Basically, what this is a rendering at every node of whether the children are left to right or right to left or top to bottom or bottom to top. Right? So this is another option that is a node-specific option, isn't it? Just like how much elision there's going to be at that node and all kinds of stuff like that. Ian, am I missing something?
I guess you could. I mean, there's
I don't think that's right, because you can specify the order in, right? You specify the order of the children. And now if you're going to tell me that at every node that might be reversed.
Only for rendering. The ordering as in a tree
Yeah,
walker.
but then what meaning does the ordering have if it can be reversed, right? Right now.
Oh, it's not reversed for tree map. It's only reversed for the rendering of the tree.
Yeah, I understand that, but then why is this a useful or interesting thing to do? All right, I then have no connection, right? If I know that, things here are, if I know the first child is on the right or the first child is on the left, and I can look at that tree and I know something about the input form. But if you're telling me that at every node I can flip, then I know nothing about what the input form from that representation.
Right. I think the point is that this would require a mark of this node is reversed. The children of this node are reversed.
But you're saying, okay, so look, let's take this thing here, right? And if we said of this thing here, if we say rotate that 90 degrees, okay. But if we said of this, flip the whole thing, right? Reflect.
Yep.
You're saying that you claim is a mere rendering option, but it keeps the integrity of the tree structure itself. Whereas my micro diddling at every tree node breaks the structure of the tree itself.
Right. Basically, I know that that the children are in one of two orders at every level. And if I care about that, I can, right. I can, I can determine it once and then I know where it is.
Well, I mean, what we need here is, okay, so right now we have essentially this rotation thing. We could presumably in the tree layout, you could give an angle and that would be the angle from the vertical or something just for fun. But the issue is, do we want to have, we've got a tree layout option here. Do we want to have the flip around trees?
Stephen, I emailed you a notebook.
Okay.
So this was a different idea we had for using like top comma left for alignment rather than for the flipping. And my thing is, the reason we brought this is every time you do tree layout goes to left, it seems that what you really want is for the first child to be on top, just by default if you say left.
Which is the default.
No, right now if you say tree layout goes to left, the first child is on the bottom because you rotate 90 degrees.
That seems wrong. That just seems wrong.
Right, and similarly, if you say tree layout goes to bottom because you rotate 180 degrees, the first child ends up on the right rather than the left.
It just seems wrong. It seems like a hack. I mean, it seems like we just need this option in from Charles and Graph, and then you need to just redo the implementation of this. I think it's just wrong. I don't think you need the micro control, but I think you do need that.
Yeah, and so that just be an inconsistency with graph layout. So I wanted to.
But
Right.
But that's my point, is that, I mean, I don't see the direct inconsistency. I mean, there are two different objects.
Yeah.
And what I will expect is that, tree layout, should actually take care of it, right? Tree have more constraint than graph. So in the layout, you should just get the result from graph and then adjust it appropriately.
Well,
We can definitely add the option on graph, but I don't mind.
I don't entirely agree with that statement, right? You might want to convert your tree to a graph, and suddenly it's opposite of what you
It
had.
will be. You cannot even guarantee that the order will be respected in graph. There is no way. What we do behind the scene, we solve an optimization problem based on some stuff. It's not just when you say left or right, we are not just rotating. So we just start to solve it with a constraint that the root node is somewhere. We are not rotating or reflecting. And for me, I can sit with Ian and solve this.
The first thing is, let's fix the default here, because it's wrong for trees. Now, this question of whether graph of the tree should be the same way up or not.
Well, graph of a tree completely blows away the layout anyway.
Exactly. Everything is completely different. There is no expectations.
Well, here, let me do this in this case. So you're not preserving the is that right? I mean, or shouldn't you try and keep the layout?
Notice graph chose a different root node.
Oh, Christ. Yeah, okay. Well, but shouldn't it by default keep the layout when you say graph of a tree? Because it can.
It can, and it comes back to what you call the calculus of annotation. What do we preserve when we inherit? We build it inside graph, right? Between graph operation. Should we build the same for tree now? So we can build that if we really want to preserve all that, definitely. We can even preserve the look, right? The shape of the node.
No, but we don't want to do that. I agree with you. It's a calculus of annotations question. And it seems like the most natural thing to do here, my first take would be preserve the positions of the nodes.
Right. Well, at least the root has to be the correct one, definitely. Yeah, so that one we can fix.
Right. I think that's what we should do. I think we should try to get graph of tree to preserve the positions of the nodes. I think we need an extra option for flipping in graph layout, and then we need to use that in trees so that when it's the left node, so it's the node at the left, it's really quite important that the first child goes at the top. Really quite important. It's really, there are many uses of tree for which it will be quite useless if you don't do that.
Yep.
Makes sense?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. All right. See you guys. Okay. See you guys soon. I gotta run off there. Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.